In this lesson, you're going to learn English with the news. We're going to look at a hot topic in the US and globally. Of course, the US presidential election. And this news article is on the presidential debate that recently took place. We'll review the article together so you can understand the advanced vocabulary, the advanced expressions, so you feel more confident understanding and discussing these hot topics. Welcome back to JForrest English. Of course, I'm Jennifer. Now let's get started.
First, I'll read the headline. Presidential debate. Trump looks to be gaining, but by how much remains to be seen. First, let's review this structure because the use of looks to be gaining is important because this means it's not a fact, but it's based on available information or observation. So it's not factual. Trump is gaining. Trump looks to be gaining. So our verb here is look, and that's why it has an S because this is in the present simple and it's conjugated with our subject, Trump. He looks. So notice you have look and then you have to be and then you have your verb in ing. Instead of look, you can also use Trump seems to be gaining or Trump appears to be gaining. All three have the same meaning and are commonly used. This expression is used in many different situations. In a workplace or in a social situation, you could say Julie seems to be upset. So based on looking at Julie, maybe her facial expression, she seems to be upset, but you don't know this as a fact because you haven't said, hey, Julie, are you upset? You're just basing it on how Julie looks. Notice here, I have to be in parentheses because it's optional. To be is optional with adjectives, feelings, emotions, and states. This isn't always though. Because of that, I recommend using it because it's always correct to use it, but it's sometimes incorrect not to use it. So because of that, be on the safe side and just use to be. Julie seems to be upset. But by how much? So how much he's gaining, the amount that he's gaining remains to be seen. Ooh, this is a great expression. Do you know what this means? This simply means is currently unknown, or we won't know until a future time. This expression applies to me right now. The expression is something remains to be seen. I could say whether my students, you, will like this video remains to be seen. It's currently unknown. At the time of me recording this, I don't know if you'll like this. I really hope you will, and I hope it will benefit you greatly, but I won't know this until I post the video on YouTube, which is in the future, and I get your reaction. But right now you're watching this, the video is on YouTube, so I can find out. Do you like this video? If you do, put like it, love it, or you rock, which is a casual native way of saying you did a great job. You rock. Put something positive in the comments so I know I have the information now that you like this video. So put that in the comments and don't worry about taking notes because I summarize everything in a free lesson PDF. You can find the link in the description. Now let's continue. Unless you live under a rock, you probably heard about the debate between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump last Thursday. Unless you live under a rock. This is a funny idiom that native speakers use quite frequently. If you live under a rock, it means you don't know about current events because you live in isolation under a rock. So you're not exposed to the outside world. This is used in more of a joking way or a sarcastic way. For example, I could say to you, you don't know what ChatGPT is? Do you live under a rock? So there is some sarcasm, maybe even a little frustration and disappointment because how could you not know that? Do you live under a rock? And obviously this is a rhetorical question. I don't expect you to reply, but it is commonly used in a question form. So the next time you're having a conversation with someone and they don't know about a current event, you can say, do you live under a rock? So that's a fun idiom in English. Unless you live under a rock, you probably heard about the debate between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump last Thursday. Biden's halting performance on the debate stage. His halting performance. Do you know this adjective? This means that Biden was hesitant, unsure, not smooth in either his speech or his overall movements. So one example could be if he were answering a question and he had a lot of word fillers. Maybe if we, then you could describe that as halting. Now, I know some students may have an issue with this because English isn't their first language, but that's why I'm here to help. Biden's halting performance on the debate stage looks to have exacerbated voters' concerns. Here, our verb is exacerbate in the past, exacerbated, and this is when something negative becomes worse. So something makes something negative even worse. So the voters already had concerns. Now, his halting performance exacerbated those concerns. His performance made those existing concerns even worse. Now, let's take a look at this because remember, we looked at this before, looks to have exacerbated. If we use this word again, it's implying some doubt. At this point, it's not fact, but it's based on observation. Notice we have the same three verbs. You can say seem, appear, or look. Remember, you have to conjugate this verb with the subject. What's the subject here? Well, it's Biden's performance. The other information just adds more detail. Biden's performance, that is conjugated as it. That's why we have the S on all three verbs. It, looks, appears, seems. So the concerns about whether he has the mental and physical fitness to serve another term as president. Instead of the mental and physical fitness, which is perfectly fine, you could replace all of that with the word stamina because stamina means the mental or physical strength to do something. For example, you need a lot of stamina to serve as president, which is true. And remember, voters are questioning if Biden has this because of his halting performance.
Are you enjoying this lesson? If you are, then I want to tell you about the Finally Fluent Academy. This is my premium training program where we study native English speakers from TV, the movies, YouTube, and the news so you can improve your listening skills of fast English, expand your vocabulary with natural expressions, and learn advanced grammar easily. Plus, you'll have me as your personal coach. You can look in the description for the link to learn more, or you can go to my website and click on Finally Fluent Academy. Now let's continue with our lesson.
Although Trump spent much of the debate repeatedly pushing falsehoods, viewers came away with a pretty concrete opinion that he'd won the debate. This is a powerful statement because notice it begins with something negative and it ends with something positive. He was pushing falsehoods. He was repeatedly, which means again and again, pushing falsehoods. So a falsehood is a statement that is untrue or inaccurate. And if you push a falsehood, it means you say it, but you say it forcefully. So a word to replace that could be asserting, repeatedly asserting falsehoods. But remember, this sounds negative, but then we end on a positive. He'd won the debate. And you can do that when you use the word although. If you start a sentence with although and you begin with a positive, the person knows you're going to end with a negative. The reverse works. You can use although, you begin with a negative, and then you end with a positive. This is a great way to sound more advanced, more fluent, and more professional in English. Let's review an example. You could share something negative and say, I can't go. I can't go to your party. Now you can make that sound softer by starting with a positive, and you start with the word although. Although I'd love to, I can't go. Or we hired someone else. This is a negative for you if you're the one who applied. Although we enjoyed meeting you, we hired someone else. So a very useful word to have in your vocabulary. Viewers came away with, if they came away with, it means they left the debate with. They came away with a pretty concrete opinion. Is concrete the material? Is it soft or firm? Concrete is what they use to pave roads, for example. It's firm, it's rock solid. So a concrete opinion is a firm opinion. It's a certain opinion. So viewers came away with a pretty concrete, firm, certain opinion that he'd won the debate, or at the very least, that Biden had lost it. It's still early, but Trump looks to have gained. Oh, again, we're using this because, again, this article isn't stating these as fact. It's based on appearance, based on observation, but we cannot say this is 100% factual or true. So that's why the verb look is so helpful. And what were the other two? Trump looks to have gained, appears to have gained, seems to have gained. Did you remember all three? And also conjugated with the subject. That's why in these cases we've seen the S, because the subject has been third person singular. But Trump looks to have gained at least some ground in the polls as we begin to examine the immediate fallout from the debate. If you gain some ground, it means that you make progress. So for example, we gained some ground, we gained a lot of ground, we didn't gain any ground with the investors. So you made progress, or if negative, you didn't make any progress with the investors. So you're no closer to your goal if it's negative, but if it's positive, you are closer to your goal. So right now you're gaining some ground, a lot of ground with your English fluency. I hope you think so as well. If you agree that these lessons are helping you make progress with your English fluency, gain some ground with your English fluency, then put, oh yes, oh yes in the comments. So I know you like these lessons. They're helping you gain some ground, and I'll keep making them. So put, oh yes in the comments. In 538's national polling average, 538 is the name of a company that does polls. Polls is another way for surveys. So they ask people, who are you voting for? Did you vote? Or whatever information the survey or poll is on. So don't be confused about this. This is the name of a company. In 538's national polling average, Trump now leads by 1.4 percentage points over Biden, while the two candidates were just about tied on June 27th, the day of the debate. So if you're tied, it means you're at the same level. Of course, this is very common in sports. You probably know this. from all the football you watch or other sports you watch when two teams are tied. But two people can be tied in the polls. And also, if you're interviewing two people for a job position in your company, they could also be tied. You don't know who you're going to hire because you like them both equally. They're tied. But then Trump now leads. So now this is Biden, this is Trump. So Trump now leads by 1.4 percentage points, which seems like it is a relatively small amount, but that's all that you need to win an election. Let's continue. Conversations about Biden potentially dropping out of the race have mushroomed in the media. Why are we using the word mushroom as a verb? And what does dropping out of? And what's the significance of potentially? Well, let's discuss all of these. The word potentially is important because it means that the possibility exists, but again, it's not certain. So it may happen, it may not happen. And what may happen? Well, Joe Biden may or may not drop out of the race. To drop out of something means to quit, but this is only used in school and, as we see here, elections. But this is not used in the workplace. You don't drop out of your job, you quit your job. So, for example, did you know that Mark Zuckerberg dropped out of Harvard University to start Facebook? He quit university. He did not graduate. He did not finish his degree. He dropped out. So Biden, conversations about Biden potentially dropping out of the race have mushroomed. Mushrooms grow very, very rapidly. And that's the image you can have of mushrooms growing rapidly. And that is what's happening here. So these conversations about Biden potentially dropping out have developed rapidly in the media. So if you search for this Biden election debate in the media, you'll probably see tons of results about will he drop out? Should he drop out? So this conversation, the issue has mushroomed. It's unclear if Biden might really step aside. So to step aside means that Biden will leave the election, leave the race, so someone else can enter. That would be what step aside means. But Texas representative, so rep is short for representative, which is this person's title. He's a representative. Texas Representative Lloyd Doggett made headlines on Tuesday. So if you make a headline, it means people are talking about you in the news. So why are people talking about this man in the news? Because here's how. By becoming the first Democratic member of Congress to call on Biden to do so. To do what? To do so. What does this represent? To do what? To drop out of the race. So this man, Lloyd Doggett, he's calling on Biden. Now, this has nothing to do with a phone call. When you call on someone to do something, you publicly ask or encourage them to do something. So this generally happens with people in authority positions. Someone might call on Mark Zuckerberg to resign from Facebook. It's possible. So in this case, this person is calling on Biden, publicly saying you should do this, and this being drop out of the race. Let's continue. But despite Biden's struggles, the word despite means we're not going to consider or take into account the information that comes immediately after despite. So you could say, despite my busy schedule, I still watch JForrest English lessons, especially her news lessons. So if you say, despite my busy schedule, you're not considering, you're not taking into account, you're ignoring your busy schedule. But despite Biden's struggles, dramatic polling movement in the next couple of weeks would be a surprise. So what would dramatic polling movement mean? Well, right now in the polls, remember they were even, but then Trump has a small lead after the debate. But a dramatic movement, polling movement, would mean Trump would go up here or Biden would go down here. Because this to this is not very dramatic, but this to this or this to this is dramatic. So they're saying dramatic polling movement in the next couple of weeks would be a surprise. If something is a surprise, it means it's not likely to happen. So they're saying dramatic polling movement isn't likely. After all, the electorate is highly polarized. So if something is a polarized issue, it means that people have very different views. So you can take any political issue and some people firmly believe this and other people firmly believe this. So they have completely different beliefs. So that is a polarized issue. So they're saying that the electorate, the people who are voting in the election, that's the electorate. The electorate is highly polarized. So some people strongly support Trump, but other people strongly support Biden, such that most voters, considering one of the major party contenders, already lean toward one or the other candidate and aren't particularly likely to jump ship. Do you know what this means? Well, this article isn't about the ocean. We're not talking about boats. So this must be an idiom because clearly there isn't a literal meaning. If someone jumps ship, it means that, well, in this context, it would be if somebody who supported Trump, after watching the debate, said, well, now I support Biden. That person jumped ship. That person completely changed their opinion or their support. You are learning a lot in this article. Nevertheless, any movement in voters' preferences could matter a great deal to the final outcome being who becomes president. That would be the final outcome in our current era of highly competitive presidential elections. Notice how they use nevertheless. Nevertheless is similar to the word despite. And in this case, because it starts a paragraph, we have to look to the last point that was made and now understand that we're saying we're not going to consider this. That is the use of nevertheless. You could also use nonetheless. It's the exact same. Nevertheless, nonetheless. Now, if you use despite, you have to use the word this or that, or you could specify the information. Despite this being the last thing that was said. Nevertheless, any movement in voters' preferences could matter a great deal to the final outcome. Over the past 6 presidential elections, just one, 2008. So they're saying, well, which election over the past 6? It's the one in 2008. And that's why this is in brackets. Just one, the one in 2008, had a national popular vote margin larger than 5 points. So they're using this to say that even though The polls are very close. Remember, Trump is just like this. And even though dramatic poll movement isn't likely, and even though people generally won't jump ship, still, it's possible that the popular vote could change, and even the slightest change can make a big difference in the final outcome. And that's what they mean by saying could matter a great deal, because only a small change is needed for one party to win. And that's the point of this and why they use nevertheless, because this is something that supports that small movements matter. And then this part said that small movements are unlikely. So a relatively complex article, even for native speakers, great vocabulary, which I hope you understand a lot better after my explanation. Feel free to watch this explanation again. But what I'll do now, we're at the end of the article, so I'll read the article from start to finish, and this time you can focus on my pronunciation. Presidential debate. Trump looks to be gaining, but by how much remains to be seen. Unless you live under a rock, you probably heard about the debate between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump last Thursday. Biden's halting performance on the debate stage looks to have exacerbated voters' concerns about whether he has the mental and physical fitness to serve another term as president. Although Trump spent much of the debate repeatedly pushing falsehoods, viewers came away with a pretty concrete opinion that he'd won the debate, or at the very least, that Biden had lost it. It's still early, but Trump looks to have gained at least some ground in the polls as we begin to examine the immediate fallout from the debate. In 538's national polling average, Trump now leads by 1.4 percentage points over Biden, while the two candidates were just about tied on June 27th, the day of the debate. Conversations about Biden potentially dropping out of the race have mushroomed in the media and among Democrats concerned about his debate performance. It's unclear if Biden might really step aside, but Texas Rep. Lloyd Doggett made headlines on Tuesday by becoming the first Democratic member of Congress to call on Biden to do so. But despite Biden's struggles, dramatic polling movement in the next couple of weeks would be a surprise. After all, the electorate is highly polarized, such that most voters considering one of the major party contenders already lean toward one or the other candidate and aren't particularly likely to jump ship. Nevertheless, any movement in voters' preferences could matter a great deal to the final outcome in our current era of highly competitive presidential elections. Over the past 6 presidential elections, just one, 2008, had a national popular vote margin larger than 5 points.
Do you want me to make more lessons just like this? If you do, then put yes, 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 put yes, yes, yes in the comments below. And of course, make sure you like this lesson, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you're notified every time I post a new lesson. And you can get this free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. You can click here to download it or look for the link in the description. And I have another news article I know you'll love reviewing, so make sure you watch it right now.